Hey guys, it's Katherine. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, it's so good to have you. So today we're going to be talking about how to choose a good doctor. And as someone who has had as many doctors as I have for as long as I have had, and from literally sea to shining sea, I have had doctors on the East Coast and on the West Coast, like literally side to side of America. I've had and almost every single kind of doctor. I've had every specialist imaginable. So I've had every kind of doctor. So yeah, I think I'm a pretty good one to talk to about how to get a good doctor. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it takes, especially after the video that I just posted, if you haven't seen it yet, about the truth about pain clinics. And it's not anything that anyone's ever covered before. It's about the thing that they've been hiding from us about how pain clinics were formed and why they didn't exist before, and just about procedures that are out there, which, by the way, I didn't mention this, but there are procedures out there. Like when I finally got a procedure done, the CRFA, it's an ablation, and basically they burned off the ends of my nerves. They just burned the nerves. And so now I don't have any sensation there. And it'll last hopefully 6 months to a year. I'm hoping for a year, but that's it. Like, that's it. So it's great that hopefully, and we can continue in that direction. That's nerve pain. There are physical treatments, but you know, the insurance companies really don't want to have to actually pay for a procedure, but that's what you're paying insurance for. So if you look at insurance companies' quarterly profits, they're in the billions of dollars, and there's a reason for that. They're not paying out for any procedures, so they're just keeping us on the pills. And if you look around, if you actually do the research, you'll notice that in America we pay more for pills than any other country in the world. We are the highest paying for pills. They've really got us going with that. So look at New Zealand. I think even the Fifth Estate CBC did an amazing thing on pills, how New Zealand handles their pills, and all of their pills, like every single prescription drug is like $5, every single one. And so that's why we're talking about redoing the system here in America, because it's once you go competitive, once you go free market, then all the prescription drugs come down. So they're even making bank on our prescription drugs right now. So it's insane. And if you heard about what they're doing with the pain pills, they are making bank on that. So they are finding ways to even make more on that. So they just created a new industry. They just made a whole new industry. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. So let's get on to how to choose an actual good doctor, how to make sure you get a good doctor. So the reason I bring it up is because I've just had 2 really good doctor's visits. And so I'm going to fidget around a lot. It's really hurting to sit. So, but it is good news because I did just have a doctor's appointment yesterday, and that usually knocks me out for about 3 days. I can't do anything for about 3 days. So I am actually active in filming the day after a doctor's visit. Like, that never happens. So it means that I am getting better, that this procedure actually did do something big in my life. I was like, I'm actually like upright the day after a doctor's visit. You know, granted it was local, but still, that's a big freaking deal, you guys. That's a big improvement. So I'm going to be fidgety because I'm not totally recovered from it, but it's a big process. It's a big freaking deal. Plus sitting, you know me, and sitting, like, I can't do it, but that's what the next procedure is for. We're going to do it. So let's talk about the 2 good doctor's visits, not the really bad one that you heard about in the previous one, and why they were good. They were good because they were 2 doctors that were really hard to find, and I'm going to tell you how I found them and how you can find them too, because after that last video you're wondering, like, how the heck do you get good doctors anymore? So let me read you what one of my doctors wrote a book, and I'm going to give you an example of what a good doctor is. She wrote a book, and we bought her book. Like, if you have a doctor that wrote a book, buy their book. And my husband is reading it now. I don't do any of that stuff because you can freak out about what's wrong with you and you start self-diagnosing. That's never a good thing to do, especially for me, a researcher. I'm like, I start imagining things or something. I don't want to do that. I want to just be clear and let my husband observe and my nurses observe and gather that data. So, but I want to read you what she wrote because I came home and read it and I kind of teared up, and I was like, I had already wanted to do this video, and after reading it, I was like, definitely got to do the video. So this is the one that wants to actually, remember how I said one of my pain doctors wants to actually do the tailbone so that I can, like, sit, you know what I mean? And, like, actually get to walking again for longer periods of time. And she wrote in her book, the inscription, I'm going to try not to cry. She said, she said, to best recovery and to the best fighter. It is a long path, but the sun shines at the end. And I'm not going to tell you her name, obviously. And she's like the best in her field. But to hear my doctor say that, like, I'm the best fighter, this is exactly what I mean, is that you need a doctor who hears you, like the doctor I had before, the one I just talked about, in that visit. Remember how I said it was a knockdown, drag out fight? He was mentioning the biofeedback, and then he was monitoring my words. He's like, why are you saying just biofeedback? Why aren't you excited about it? Why aren't you happy? And I actually had to stop him and say, have I ever not done anything you've asked me to do? Have I ever not done it? Have I ever not done something you have asked me to do? And he had to stop and think. He's like, no, you've actually done everything. I was like, yes, I know other patients don't. I know other patients don't do that. I've never given you any reason to doubt me. I've never given you any reason to treat me like this. Like, do not confuse me with that. Like, I am not that patient. Remember who I am. I'm right here. Remember who I am, this patient. And the reason I say that is because the thing that's going on in pain clinics right now, and you're going to see this, it's happening now when I went to see my other doctor, which isn't a pain doctor. And you need to be aware that this is going on when you go to choose a good doctor. You need to be aware that this is a big thing that's happening because addiction is so high. So many people are going in to just get pain meds. But you can see the difference when you look at the waiting room. Like when I went to the other pain clinic, I sat in the waiting room with my husband and I was like, look across the room. And there were either people like this, like sitting there, like with their eyelids kind of like fluttering and just kind of, they were drugged out. And then there were other people alert. You know, if you know how to use your meds to the point where you only go to the point where you're alert, then you know it's working for you. If you're going to the point where you're like this, then you're getting like high off of them. You're going too high on the meds. Like the moment you get sleepy, you've overdosed. Like you've gone too far. Like never use it more than you're alert and awake. And you can tell in the waiting room, and the doctors are trying to figure that out. Not all doctors know to look for those signs. Like they haven't been trained in that kind of thing. And so all doctors are like alert and aware and like, oh, you want pain medication. Like, you know, you must be an addict. And you're like, oh my God, like, you know, you have to show them that you're alert and you're aware and that you want the same thing. Because doctors today, they don't think anyone wants off of it because the, you know, insurance companies is so much in their head. And this is why it's so great when you get a doctor like this, because they say it's a long path, but the sun shines in the end. She knows that I want it to end. She knows that I don't want a cycle of continuing. So how did I get that doctor? Well, the number one rule is this. Find a doctor that's like you. That is the number one rule. Oh, sorry, I have this new background because the other background is just completely trashed right now. So I was like, find something else. So you get my Route 66 sign. My husband and I used to travel all the time, which is why I want to sit up, because once I can sit up, I can like road trip again. I really want to be able to drive in the car again and like travel again. If I can sit upright, I can go on the road again. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really want to do that. Right now I have to lay down flat in a car bed. That's really not a good way. I can't talk to him, you know? Anyway, so yeah, you need to find someone that's like you. That's the number one thing, is you need to find somebody that is like you. Why is that? You need to find, there's a lot of different doctors out there, and it may take time, but you've got to find a doctor who thinks like you. I've told you this before. When I did my education class, when I did my education course, I remember very clearly there's like 7 patterns, I believe, of thinking. Like there's circular thinking, and there's ... thinking, and there's linear thinking, like, or there's straight line thinking. And that's the way they teach us. Well, they used to teach us in school, linear thinking, you know, prove your point, introduction paragraph, prove your point 1, prove your point 2, prove your point 3, and then at the end. And that's like logic A equals B equals C, and then that means equals D, A equals D. So luckily I was a linear thinker. So like school was like easy for me. You know what I mean? Like, but I learned why it was easy for me, because I was a linear thinker and school taught linear thought. But there's 7 different ways of thinking. And I was so glad I learned that, because as a teacher, I just changed to each one of those patterns of thinking with my students. I made sure that I addressed all of those patterns when I was in a classroom or when I was teaching champion dancing. Any of those things, I would just switch, because I understood there's so many different ways. It's the same thing. There are doctors out there that think all of those different patterns. You want to find a doctor that thinks like you. So I needed a doctor that thinked linear. And not only that, but also was a fighter like me, like who just not only thought linear, but just was very present, like I'm very present and in the moment, and is like a problem solver who's just like me. And when I said my doctors really worked for me out in California, it's because we found especially one doctor who just really, I'll never forget the day I got him. I'll never forget it, because I went in there and I was just like, screw it. And this is point 2. So number 1, find a doctor who is like you, who's like your personality, who you feel like you can talk to. Like she recommended a doctor who is a spine doctor, and I went to him, and I literally like couldn't talk to him, because he got in there and his entire demeanor was like giving me the finger. Like his just entire body was like, F you, like the entire time. It, not even F you, it was like your meat. Like he just was like, your meat, you're disgusting, your meat. And it was that classist and that Titanic versus whatever. He literally thought I was meat, and like I didn't deserve to breathe the air around him. And he never looked at me, he never made direct eye contact, and I was saying stuff and it was just shooting by him. And it was hard to like even communicate with someone that hates your presence so much, and just was kind of like not interested in you at all. Like just, it's when you get in a room like that, what happens is you don't feel conducive to sharing, and then your testimony, if as you will, is not corroborated, it's corroded. Like you will not give clean testimony when you're in a room with someone who thinks like you and communicates like you. Then they ask you questions that you understand, and you're able to communicate with them, and they're hearing you. You have a much clearer channel with them. You're able to For example, like when you go to a school, like all the schools out here where I am, where they're the best, they're all medical schools. So they all have a medical student with you first. They always have a fellow and they always have a student. And we ended up saying, forget it. We don't want to use the students, because every time we sat there and gave them information, every single time they would take the notes, and we would get the notes afterwards, and we would be like, it was a different we were like, who is this patient? Who is this patient? And you guys should look at that, because I've had people even at our local hospital, like we'll never go to our local hospital, because they will forge documents. Like they'll go in there and they will do this one thing, and it turns out that they're supposed to do a series of tests in order to like diagnose this or diagnose that. Like if they have a broken this or in their car accident, they're supposed to do a series of tests. They'll check them out, and then the sheet will say, we did all these tests, and they didn't do any of those tests. And you have got to check those things. You got to check your medical records. You got to be on it. And so we always have to call back and correct it. And we finally were like, we get the student in, and we are just like, we'll wait for the doctor. And I'm sure it just drives the doctor nuts, because then they have to like listen and take the notes. But we are like, our notes will never be correct. Like our notes will never be correct, and it lasts forever. My meds. So it lasts forever, and it's just I'm sorry, I take meds so many times a day. I have so many alarms. My medicine bag now, we have this big, huge medicine container thing. And when we ordered it, we were finally like, oh, this one works for us. And it came out, and was like stuff seniors need. And we were like, oh my gosh, stuff seniors need. And then we went to the website and we're like, all this stuff is great. But I was like, it's not seniors who need it anymore. Like all the stuff that has saved my life, it's all labeled as stuff seniors need. And I was just like, but everyone's sick now. Like so many people are sick now. So like go to stuff seniors need. Like, trust me, if you're sick and you're chronically ill, because not one of my doctors ever recommended ever recommended like any of my handicap stuff, like any of my bars, any of my railings. My nurses recommended all that stuff. So you got to fight for yourself on that. So, all right. So number one, find someone who's like you, because your communication will be clearer. You will find yourself sharing more. You'll find yourself sharing more accurate information because you will feel more comfortable, and you will find yourself not forgetting as much to tell them. You'll feel comfortable to bring whatever notes that you bring in. You'll just feel safer in that moment, and you'll share more in the short time that you have. So find someone that thinks like you. It may take time, but it is worth it. All right. Number two, how to find a good doctor. All right. Number two, we got passed off a lot. You get passed off a lot. People do the shuffle. Like, we went to a neurologist. Finally, they did an MRI, and she ordered an MRI head to toe. And then she's like, oh my God, you need spine surgery. You need spine surgery. That was like 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago now. She's like, you need spine surgery within the next month. You need it now. And I was just like, oh my gosh, my nurses were like, duh, you need spine surgery. And I was like, really? And they're like, hello. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Still haven't had that, but they were like, yeah, well, then they recommended us to go to a spine surgeon. And then none of the spine surgeons would take the case. They were like, no, like, we'd rather have you go over to this physiologist or something. But then the physiologist was like, well, we won't take you as long as you're seeing a pain clinic. If you're seeing the pain clinic, we refuse to take you as we refuse to take pain clinic patients. And that took like a 1.5 years of like bouncing around to finally figure out that like I couldn't. So I have not had spine surgery because no one will take me, because I don't know, just no one. And so we like went back to the neurologist, and she was just like, all your meds look good. Like, that was it. Like, we were just like, you're kidding me. Like, and I even had an episode in her office. It was awful. Like, she saw all of it or whatever, but she helped me know. She was like, okay, you're having, she knew what to do, like, immediately. Like, she put me in a dark room. She knew all the things to do, but she didn't give me a word of what it was. I really wish she had. So I haven't had spine surgery, the thing that they said. And it's been, they'll put you on this cycle. So how did I get to the doctor that's really good right now? Well, and the doctor visit that I had, she was my primary physician. The one that I have now, she thinks just like us too. Like, we can go forever in our sessions, and she looks forward to having us because we think alike and we just enjoy each other. And we're always like, how are you doing? And how was your trip here and your vacation here? And we just really, really connect with her. Like, we feel so safe with her. And we always feel like we could go out to, you want to get someone you feel like you could go out to dinner with afterwards. That's what you want. Like, you want someone you could feel like you could hang with. If you're a social person, if you're antisocial, if you're an introvert, then you know what I mean. Like, someone that you just feel like understands you. Okay. So how did I get the specialist? Like, how did I get the specialist that I have? That took a long time. Like, that took a long time to get. But the way that I did it is, we finally learned, we had one of my students in dancing, because remember how I said that we had a car accident and they didn't treat me, and I said it wasn't until a girl from Europe said, what the heck are you doing? Well, what she said was she had had a concussion in Europe, and they told her, you're out. Like, go sit in a bed, put a ton of ice on your head, sit down, pack it with ice, and stay there until your head stabilizes, until you can like watch. And they gave her all these rules. And so I did that. I stopped working. I did all the things that they told them to do in Europe back then. And I applied that to my healthcare. And once I started doing that, I started listening to my body. And thank God I did that, or I'd be a lot worse today. Thank God I ran into her, or I would be so much worse today. And then while I was doing that, while I was slowing down, and oh my God, I remember I was slowing down. I was like, oh, I'll finish out my contracts and I just won't teach any privates. And then I remember this guy came up to me and he's like, do you know people with a concussion that don't treat it, their rate of Alzheimer's goes up like, 85%. And I was like, what? He's like, why are you finishing out your contracts? You need to stop now. Like, he kicked, it was in the hotel room in LA, right in Hollywood. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He kicked my freaking butt from here to come. And then another student in the same weekend, she's like, you need an advocate. You need a doctor that's an advocate for you. And we found that in California. But when we got out here, we didn't have a doctor who was an advocate for us. And we had to learn what advocate was. And what we learned was, all right, we can't find a doctor who's an advocate for us, who will go out and fight for us. And there's no omnibuds people where we are. They don't have that in our state. So we were like, which I really recommend that you get. So, because they'll fight for you. So we were like, what do we do? And finally we realized we have to be advocates for ourselves. So that's step number 2. You need to be an advocate for yourself. No one's going to fight for you. We all expect our doctors to fight for us. That's not the way the medical field treats it anymore. They treat it as if, like, you know, they're not in that mindset anymore. A lot of these doctors, they don't know. Like, there was an argument about, today, there was an argument about the gangrene, about, oh God, and like whether or not you just let it take over the body and let it kill the person in the slow death, or if you'd really cut it off. Because why would you invade a person's body and let them lose a leg and let them live like that? And I was like, at first, there was part of me that was like totally horrified and disgusted at that. And then I was just like, nope, that's about in line with how the insurance companies has rated them. They would rather think about how much money an insurance company would make on all the medications a person would need of someone slowly dying from gangrene, like how much money they'd make, and through the death and everything, versus actually amputating. That would be one surgery and done, but it would cost them a lot of money. But the patient would really suffer the bill if they would pay out the most money to the insurance company if they let gangrene take over. It doesn't matter that they lose their life, right? And doctors are actually thinking like, oh, a patient, how horrible it would be to lose a leg, because we're so beauty driven. And all of us are like, take the damn leg off. Like, we don't want to live with gangrene and let it take over our body in a hellish death. But that's what the medical community is actually having a debate on after my last video. So like, and I think it's been creeping for 20 years. It's been creeping since 96. And it's a mentality now. And it's not, I think right now, if doctors are seeing that video, they're waking up to it. And now they're making decisions. Like, they're either deciding one way or another. Like, oh, there is a way to do it. Like, there are procedures. There are patients who actually want out of this and don't want to take the meds. Oh, we do have options. Like, I forgot about that. And they're going that way. And some are going in a private practice. And patients would love that. Like, I would kill for a doctor in private practice that's willing to actually treat me. Like, we did that. Like, our insurance company dropped that amazing doctor in California. And we just, we started selling off furniture to pay for him. Like, that's what I mean. We just did to pay. We didn't care. We were like, that's how much we love an advocate. So what we did when we got out here, we were like, all right, no one's going to advocate for us. So we're going to advocate for ourselves. And so what I did is I started doing this huge, I got a 24-hour calendar, and I started marking out my health every single hour, and I color coded it. And I just marked out every single hour of every single day of like where I was, and I had a color code for it. And then I did a whole, like, for every single part of my health, like for the bleeding I told you about, for the headaches I told you about, for the seizures I told you about. And I made like really, really detailed notes, and like I did every single hour of the day. And we did that for a month. And then we collected the data. And when we got to the next doctor they passed us off to, like once again, like the 12th doctor when we were out here, and we were just desperate at that point. Like, at this point, we were driving 2.5 hours, and they were about to pass us off again. And this was the turning point. This is how I got my new doctor. I said, before you, well, I remember, first of all, she yelled at me. She yelled at me for not having a pain specialist. She was like, you're not at a pain clinic? And I was like, no. She's like, I can't yell at you, but she yelled at me about why we weren't at a pain clinic. No one would take me. Like, that's how bad my local hospital is. The pain clinic wouldn't take me. Like, they refused to take me. Like, that's how much they were like, just stay on the meds with your main doctor. Like, a pain clinic can actually give you the injections, do the procedures, but the pain clinic refused to take me. Like, the person like this, in this much pain, like suffering, they just refused to take me. So she screamed at me and said, why aren't you at a pain? And I was like, because none of my doctors have gotten me into one. Like, that's not my fault. Like, as if I had a choice in the matter. As if I had a choice in the matter. So she yelled at me, first of all. But I stuck with it because I had made this month-long detailed analysis. Like it even says, I thought it was interesting because even back then, this is years ago now. This is, I think 2014. And it's so interesting because it still says like this, like look at this, 14 hours lying down, 6.5 sitting up, 3.75 active. Like still 3.75 at 14.5 hours in bed, 7 hours upright, 2.5 hours moving. 19.5 hours in bed, 3.5 sitting, 1.0 moving. And I'm just like, it took this long to have it change. Like today is the day it's changing. Like this week is the day it's changing. And I'm like, wow, it's been going on for a long time. But I found that out. So I went into this lady, like, look at this day. Look at this day. It's just black. Like this was just me in bed. All when sitting up means like I'm in bed still. I'm not out of bed. So it's just, I made this detailed list. I made a detailed list of the bleeding and everything and which areas of my spine were hurting. So what I did was I stopped the lady before she was going to just say, I have no help for you. And I said, for my own benefit, I said, so that I don't jip myself, for my personal responsibility, and that's the way you put it, for my personal responsibility, I have to read these symptoms off for you. For my own personal responsibility, to be responsible to myself, I have to read these off. And I read all 45 symptoms off, one by one. And as I read them off, she started thinking of people she'd met at parties. And she thought of this one who's the best. And she's like, and she'd only met her once. She only met this one lady who's like right in this area, in the hip area. She'd met her once and she's like, it's been like 7 years, but I remember, let me see if she's still around. And that's when like it changed. Like that's when, that's the woman who, and we finally met a doctor here other than my primary. But my primary, the thing is that she wouldn't change anything. She refused to change my pain meds. Like my doctor over there was trying to get me off. When we got here, she refused to change them. She refused to try and get me off. And I was just like, frickin', like I want, it was awful. Like she refused to change to get me onto something else, like something different. Like I'm not on Oxy, thank God. But like, so something just not like these horrible high doses of things. Sorry, I don't like it. I don't like it. And that's the thing is doctors, all the insurance companies tell doctors today, like, oh, they're just coming, they want them, they want them, they want them. And, so the doctors don't hear, like, to the people that don't. Because people who are in pain, the thing is the pain meds, they really don't keep you out of pain. They just keep you from passing out. That's the thing. And they know that. Because it keeps you coming back from work, because it keeps you from passing out. A level 10 is passing out. So that's what I did is I read off because I fought for myself. I made a detailed list of my symptoms and I said for my own personal responsibility, let me read these off. And when I did that, then she started referring me to places. And then the third thing I did is that I started using my resources. I stopped relying on the doctors I knew. And I started, and their references, and I started asking every single insider I knew. And that doesn't mean that you have to know insiders. That means that you need to start asking family, friends, relatives, everyone, ask your Facebook friends or whatever, and ask them who you know that's good. Like you have to just throw it out there and just be like, do you recommend anybody? And they'll give you crazy things. They'll be like, hook yourself up to electrodes and everything like that. But be like, I need names of doctors that you trust. Do you have a family doctor that you trust? Do you have a neurologist that you trust? Do you have an OBGYN that you trust? And you can't trust online reviews, dear God. But in one meeting, you'll know. In one meeting, you'll know. It's like with a therapist. You know in one meeting if they're hearing you. And the same goes for therapists. They have to be like you. And if you go to marriage counseling, that's another thing, a fourth tip for you. I was going to just throw this in there for you because therapy is such a big deal, but you can waste your money on it because there are so many therapists out there it's been written, studies have shown therapists do it for their own, ego. So, you need to go to a therapist that if you're going to marriage counseling, when you walk out, you both hear the same thing. If you do not hear the same thing when you walk out, you need a different marriage counselor. You need a different marriage and family therapist. Bar none. You have to hear the same thing when you walk out. Just the way it is. And then if you go alone, then you have to walk out feeling like the sun is out. every time something's been revealed. Every time should be like that. Or like the first time, you usually don't get to unlock everything, but the first time you need to be like, someone finally understands me. Like they actually heard me. Like the question should reveal that they heard me. And you need to feel like a burden's been lifted, like you finally have a place to go. If that doesn't happen, and sometimes it can take two, but usually if there's a little niggling doubt or something like that, it's never worth it. It's never, ever, ever worth it. So, yeah, so those are my three things. Like I don't remember my memory isn't, I'm sorry, it's still the day after the thing. But number one, they have to be like you. And number two is you have to fight for yourself, be an advocate, make a list of things, and make sure that you go in there fighting. And number three is ask around. Use the resources and ask around. And don't be scared to go outside. Ask your nurses, get a nurse, ask your nurses who they know. And they always say, oh, don't listen to your nurses when they give you med recommendations. I'm sorry, but I'm going to get in trouble for this, I know. But every single thing, every med that my nurses have recommended have changed my life for the better. Every freaking one. Massive difference, because their drug interactions have been better. Like, they don't touch my meds, but they're like, there's a new drug out there that does not interact with any of those meds. You have interactions going on that are causing this dizziness, this thing, this. And I'm just like, what? And then we switched to the new one and we're like, oh my God, all these side effects went away. So yeah, like nurses can be really great if you get the right company. And the very last thing and the third thing, yeah, ask your family and friends, and then know the thing about psychiatrists. And then right before the very end, honestly, if you can afford it and pull it together, if you can do it, get 3 hours of house cleaning. For those of you who are disabled, 3 hours of a house cleaner a week will change your lives. Change your lives. If you can do it, if the new tax cuts or whatever, or you get a raise, or pull it together, or do what you can, 3 hours of house cleaning a week will change your lives. Because it does something to you. It does something to you. And if you can get a nurse to do it and they can bathe you while they're doing it, it can change your life. It can change, it mentally changed my life. Like, it mentally turned me around. Instead of feeling like a failure every single day and that I was drowning, it took all the stress off. And that's when I started doing this. Once we started doing this, I was clear-headed enough to start focusing on my healthcare and being an advocate instead of drowning in trash up to here and dishes up to here, because we were just overwhelmed. And it finally calmed everything down. All right, I'm out of time. I love you guys so much. I'm so glad I got to do 2 videos in a week. And share this and subscribe. And yes, please donate. Please keep these videos going, and it's just a very easy PayPal donation, and give whatever you can. Give $3. $3 make a really huge difference. And for those of you who are on TV, you should be giving me way the hell more than that. And yeah, I can't wait to meet you. Bye.